Okay, it's about that time. This feels pretty early, does it not? I don't know, man. Because I teach another class late the day before. And so we'll see how it goes. All right, welcome. We have one person that wasn't here last week. Is anybody else here who wasn't here last week? Patrick, but you're set up, right? Yeah, I saw you in the system, so that's cool. Very good. Alrighty, so let's get rolling. Let's start off with a little bit of review. I get that a lot of folks are a bit surprised that they got feedback on, on what we did on the very first day, which is fair, right? But I really want you guys to get used to the way this thing works. Last week I was talking a lot about how development has changed. It's a much more collaborative environment. I want to show you a little example of that. Go ahead and log into Leaflet. If you remember, it's app.leafletlearning.com. And you set up your account last week. So we'll be using that like every week. That's how we're coordinating stuff. I'm going to do the same. Let me get the projector rocking here. And when you log in, you're going to see a nice new landing area. All right. Huh? You guys like? That was not there the last time you were here. So I'm pretty proud of this, I must admit. This is an area that myself and Devin worked on quite a lot. So when you're logged in, yours may look just a little bit different than mine, because I am registered to all the courses because I teach them. So for me, I see, two up here. These are my what we call the vanilla JS course is my INM 220. It's a little more basic. And then over here, this is you guys. And if you click on the view button on the course that you're in, it automatically opens up your labs for you to show you everything that we've done. So hopefully I think it's a lot nicer to look at. The cards design is something big in material design. Google uses that kind of thing a lot, so we really like that. And then this over here, this is my favorite section, because what I really want to be able to do is take stuff that you guys are doing, and, when we see something interesting or something that was nicely done, we can drop it up here in the announcements so that everybody can check it out. So the announcements up top here, they're the ones that are specific to your class. Then if I go down a little bit, there's announcements for your course. So basically all the classes that are taking that particular course will see these announcements. At the very bottom, I wanted one more section, which is a little bit more general announcements. And this is regarding, resources and things that I think you should know about. So this one that I put up here for the first week is about Create and TO. Have you guys heard of that group? Create and TO. It's good to know about. If you haven't heard of this, maybe you've heard of FITC, the big design and technology conference, it's awesome. FITC is great, I love it. But it's real expensive, dude. It's like $800 to get a ticket for that thing. But this is actually organized by the same people. that run that conference. And it's every month at a place called Handlebar in Kensington Market. And it's like one of the longest running groups. They've been around since long before meetup.com or any of those. And so you can meet a lot of the same people that would be at FITC at this, and this is free. You probably have to buy, a drink or something, but that's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. So this is a good one to know about. So I'll post things like that up here that if you're looking to build your network a little bit or talk with other developers and designers that have experience. A lot of the alumni shows up for this because they've done things with FITC, so it's a good one to know about. So I'm pretty happy about this section up in here. Okay, so before we get into today's lesson, today we're going to be doing a little bit more with the React components that we kind of started with. We got a little bit of an introduction to React components last week. We're going to be continuing and going a little bit further. But before I get into that, I wanted to cover the whole feedback process, right? Now, I did talk about it a fair amount in the last class, but now we've got one lab under our belt, kind of, and so you can actually see how that process works. Each of the labs that we do, you submit your URL on the day that we are doing the lab. 2 days later, somebody's going to be looking at that and giving you some feedback. Now, you should get an email about that, but I can't guarantee that you get that email, because a lot of stuff can happen, right? Like the school, for instance, quarantines a lot of emails, so there may be a delay, or it might be in a spam folder or something like that. So I would say don't rely 100% on that email. You'll probably get it, but all I can do is ensure that our system sends it, and after that, I can't do too much. So just be aware that like every time, 2 days after, someone's going to put feedback on your lab there. So the point of that, and then they will actually assign you a grade at that point. But the whole point of it is that they can give you some helpful suggestions and tips. They can, answer any of your questions or so forth. And then you have basically until the day before the next lab to implement the feedback. So they'll go back and they'll look the day before. So for us, they would have checked yesterday again, just to see, did you have any problems? Were you able to implement the feedback and so forth? And then at that point, they'll finalize the grade for that lab. So does the scheduling, do you guys get the scheduling of that? So we're going to do our lesson today. 2 days from today, they're going to be looking in for that first round of feedback and suggestions. And then next week, the day before our lab, they'll check in again. And the second check-in is just to see, were you able to do the feedback that they suggested? Now, I know this is a little different from what you're used to. But as I mentioned in the last lab, this is a lesson-based curriculum. This isn't like a project-based curriculum. Now, the whole point of that is that you get used to this modern way of developing, this collaborative development. Today, like no one gets handed a whole project to do. Never happens. Never, ever, ever. For one thing, the range of skill sets needed to produce a project is quite broad now. And secondly, from a business standpoint, businesses are very reluctant to have all of their online properties or their software dependent on one person. That is a real problem, and they tend to avoid it like the plague now. Because what if something happens to that person? Or what if that person just doesn't want to work on it anymore? Now they have a very tough process of trying to transfer that knowledge to somebody else who can work on the thing. So it's pretty much always going to be team-based and it's going to be collaborative. And even the tools that we use have changed enormously in the last few years to facilitate that process. So I want to use as an example this update. It wasn't here the last time that you guys were here. It springs to life, you know, with your login today. And to get, if you think of it, like it's kind of a tricky process because we're building the software while it's being used. So I want to show you how that happens so that you can understand a little bit about this feedback and review process that we're doing on the labs. I'm going to go to GitHub, which is a more advanced tool that development teams use to coordinate their effort. So I think some of you guys mentioned you have some familiarity with GitHub here. I'm going to go into the area that we use to organize Leaflet. And up here, in this area called pull requests, you can see right here, we have like 46 completed pull requests. So each one of these is kind of comparable to the labs that we're doing. And the way that it works is that the pull request starts with some kind of idea of a feature or something that we want to build or some kind of enhancement. And someone will propose it. And that's the very first step that happens. So this is why, you know, when we come into the labs, the first thing I'll get you to do is to submit your URL to the pen you're going to work in. I like to say our business is different because we submit the assignment before we do it. It's weird, right? But that is kind of how it goes. So I want to show you specifically the one that resulted in the landing area change. Here we go. Good old pull 69. Come on. There we go. Right. So some of you guys would have gotten some feedback actually from these folks in your feedback area. This is Devin. And so she had this idea about adding the announcements section to our software. And so like the very first thing that she's doing, which I guess it's taken us about 12 days to implement this all. The very first thing that she does is propose this. And the second that she does, you know, this area of the repository is open for anybody to see on the team. So my first comment, it looks stupid. Like my comment is just like, cool, I'll take a look, right? Now this seems pretty stupid, right? I'm not saying anything useful, but it's actually remarkably useful because this is me acknowledging what she's posted here. It's just a way of me saying like, you know, okay, I recognize this is cool. I'm going to take a look at this. And I wanted to point that out because otherwise, you know, Devin can be sitting there wondering like, oh, maybe nobody likes this thing that I'm proposing. And she just doesn't know. I may love it, but if I don't say something, how's she going to know that, right? So the comparison with the feedback on your labs is like when you get the feedback, the best thing you can do right away is just to acknowledge it and say like, oh, thanks, I'll give that a try. Anything like that is good. But then the reviewer isn't wondering, oh, maybe you didn't see it or you didn't get it or you're ignoring me. That's the worst, right? And it's very simple to do. So if you make a plan, like 2 days from today, to just check that feedback and acknowledge whatever is there, right away, you know, you're building better relationship with your team that you're working with. Now, as goes down here, and you can sort of get an idea of the dates, right? So here's me contributing a little bit into it, doing some code and so forth, a little bit more code into it. Now here's Adam weighing in, and he's basically, picking out some of the finer points here and saying like, oh, you're doing it this way, you could probably do it this way, and it's small stuff, but it's pretty important. Little things like that can make a big difference. And he's pretty meticulous with his code. Like he's, he'll catch stuff that we don't catch quite often. And so then, here's us like changing all kinds of different code in here and working on it. And then here's Adam saying like, this is pretty valid here. He's like, I can't do it right now, but I can do it at this time. And then down here, it keeps going away. Here's Devin weighing in again to make some changes to the CSS for the styling. Boom, 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 on and on it goes. So you get the idea, right? Like, there's a lot of back and forth going on in here, a lot of communication. And the end result of it, woo, took a while. The end result of it was like, less than 24 hours ago, I pushed it live. And so this results in, hopefully, in the thing, seamlessly and smoothly coming to life for you guys without any interruption of service. We don't have to shut it down or anything like that. You can see like the importance of the communication in here. What happens if this handsome devil takes a week off, just kind of disappears and says, it'll be fine. I'll catch up the next time I see those guys and it'll be all good. You can see like this whole process breaks down if that happens. And like this is very common. This is the way most places are. No, I should revise that. This is the way that good places are working, right? Places that don't have some kind of system or organization like this, you're going to work very, very long hours in pretty hellish conditions. Because the thing with this is like, the ball can keep moving forward all the time because we all sort of understand and know what's going on in there. So it means, yeah, you can schedule a vacation. Yeah, you can say, I can't work after 5 or something, or I want to spend this day with my kid or something like that, right? Because we just adapt it and it keeps going. That's really, really nice. I've worked in places where that was just not possible because, you're the lone developer working on this thing, so you really cannot get any time off, and it gets worse and worse. And this provides kind of the cure for it. So in the way that I'm running the classes, it's kind of a simulation of this. Not so big as this, but like a simplified version of it, where when you post your URL, that's you doing what Devin did at the beginning, being like, okay, I'm starting this lesson. In a little while, someone will look in and will say, oh, here's something you could try, or here's what I'd suggest, or are you having any problem with this? You acknowledge it, you do a little bit of work on it, they check in again, they see, hey, you made some progress here, this is really great. And the cycle repeats week to week to week. Does that make sense? Is that fairly clear? So here's what it means for you. It means that the course is not just what you're doing in class. That's really important to realize because I'll be honest with you guys, 100% honesty here, you cannot learn web development in 2.5 hours a week. Impossible. Just not gonna, think of the boot camps, the code boot camps. Those guys want to make people do 11-hour days learning this stuff every day. That's also bullshit because you can't learn that way either. I'll be honest with you. I meet people from the boot camps all the time, and they're like, there was a lot going on, but I don't know what I'm doing. And, and the reason why is because the way to learn development is with frequent smaller sessions, which means that you kind of got to be checking in on it day to day kind of thing. Not for a long time. You don't have to grind for hours, but you do have to have lots of stops and starts in order to learn it. And it does take time. But hopefully this system will get you in the habit. So with what we do today, it would be really cool if you made a plan that tomorrow you're going to bring it up and take a look at it. Even if you don't do anything with it, just looking at it, if you look in it, I bet you will do something with it. You know, you'll have some idea and you'll be just like, oh, let me just try this one little thing. And that's great. That's what you need. And then the day after that, when you get your feedback, you should really be welcoming that, you know, because here's an impartial set of eyes looking at your stuff. And these guys are really good. Like, they're well experienced. So enough of that. I think you guys are fairly clear on how it works. I mean, you're going to have a lot of chance to practice it, so you will be clear on it for sure. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the grading. Like, how do we come to the grades? I feel sometimes like people lose faith in grades a little bit. And I think that's mostly because sometimes you don't know how you got that grade. You know what I mean? Like, you get this grade, especially towards the end of the semester. You've worked hard on some project or something, and you turn it in, and you get a grade, and then the semester is done, and you don't really know how that grade happened. Is that fair to say? I know when I was a student, that happened a fair amount. I don't want that to be the case here. So let me talk about how you come to a grade that you come to. So as a developer, you go through certain stages of proficiency. The first stage is when you basically can repeat what you see. And that is where everybody starts with. I know that was how I started. I started by typing out what I saw online or from other people. And that's good. It's okay. And there's things that you can do even career-wise if that's where you're at. Updating search terms on pages and things like that calls for that kind of thing. That is the base level, though. So in terms of grades, it's average. It's a C. So if what I get is pretty much exactly what I did in class, then you do okay, but it will be average. It'll be like a C. Now, the way that you get beyond that is to advance to the next level, which is modifying things. So you're typing out what you've seen in class, but you're a little more bolder because now you are changing the variables. You are changing the content. Like with my INM 220s, for instance, you know, I'm doing some data modeling with them, and I can almost guarantee that in that first class, if I data model a coffee order, I'm going to see coffee orders from everybody because they're not sure of themselves, right? You guys are 420, so you should be at a point where you can feel pretty free modifying what we are doing, and that will get you up to like the B or the B plus if you modified it quite a bit and so forth. Now, the next level of proficiency is when you can actually create your own stuff. This means that you've understood the principle of the lesson that we're doing, and you've not only repeated it, and you've not only modified it, but you've added to it. Now you're showing creativity, you're showing initiative, and that proves, that is really the only stage that proves you really understood what we did. Because at those earlier stages, if we're being honest, someone could do it with a Control-C, Control-V. Could they not? So where is the benefit to you if you're producing something that somebody else could just come along and copy-paste? You have no advantage over that person. And that's not fair, because you're here working hard, dealing with those friggin' bugs and typos and all this stuff. Why should somebody else come along and copy-paste and get the same benefit that you do? It shouldn't be like that. So the way that the grading is designed is that I'm not going to come up here and be like, oh, you copy-pasted, so you get an F. If I'm trying to do that, there's going to be no end of it, right? So the way that we do it instead is to say, okay, I'm not going to judge whether you copy-pasted or not. I am going to say, this is the exact same thing that I did, so it's pretty average, because anyone in here could have done it. And then, what you do outside of that distinguishes you, shows whether you understand it, whether you are creative about it. Now, like ordinarily, I don't fault classes that don't do that, because it takes a lot of time and energy to do that. It means that we have to look at all the lines of code that you do and analyze it and provide feedback for every single lab that you do. Frankly, it takes a fair amount of money. Because like Devin and Adam, I pay them for doing these reviews and stuff that they do for you guys. That comes out of my company's resources. And a lot of people wouldn't be able to do that, but we are. And we want to, so that you can get off to a good start and get past the pain point of development and get to a point where you really understand what you're doing and you can produce interesting stuff. So does that make sense, the grading system? Is that fairly okay? Cool, okay, cool. All right, so let's set that stuff aside. And we could dive right on into our new lesson here. So let me join you guys. And you'll want to be logged in. 420 is BB. So the new one is the Lab 2, but why don't we take a quick look at Lab 1, just to recap a little bit what we did last week, and then we'll continue from there. So let me dive into Lab 1 just for a second and bring up that lesson pen. If you weren't here last week, guys, I'll just make a quick note to you that I'm streaming the class. So everything that we do, it goes up on YouTube. And so the link that you see in Leaflet is the stream for that class. So if you ever need to review or whatever, you can go there.
I tried watching it the other day, but it's a little bit weird not being able to see the YouTube.
How much did you watch?
I watched for about 45 minutes, and I was like, I guess I'll come to class.
Well, of course you should come to class, yes. But what I just did there is switch it over to the screen. So if you went a bit further in, then...
I saw when you got to that part,
yeah.
my computer it automatically sets it to 360p, which is not...
Lame.
So then I checked it, I was like, oh, it's an HD, okay, so that worked better.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little tricky because I wish I had a camera operator. That would help so much because sometimes I'm up here, sometimes over there. But it is what it is. Hopefully it's helpful. So let's do a quick little recap of what we did last week here for a minute.
What was the website?
It's app.leafletlearning.com. Let me put it up in big here. So. There we go. Yeah, I'll give you guys a second.
Last week I was late, so I didn't finish the lab work. So
Okay. Do you have a login now?
yeah.
Okay, then just continue with today.
Is it okay? So can I catch up the?
Well, no, that's done. But don't worry about it because we have about 14 labs. So if you weren't able to finish this one, as we continue, that one will just get replaced. I will take like your top 10 labs, and that's what your final grade will be. So I would say just continue from this point.
So can you help me out my setting? Is it work or this is my name?
Yeah. So because that one is already done, you cannot submit anything. So it's too late for that, but we'll be continuing on from lab 2. So this one will allow you to submit for today. So when we get to today's, you'll be able to submit it in there. But that other one, it's too late. That's already past the due date. I'll help you. Yeah.
For the grade,
Yes.
I'm just supposed to work in CSS.
Well, I'd have to look at your feedback and see, but
Oh, because you said that I didn't work on it. Like I didn't make changes.
which is true.
Yeah. Like, what type of changes exactly?
Well, it would be in the feedback there. They'll make some suggestions of what kinds of changes you could consider doing. It'll be different person to person, depending on what you did while you were in class. So,
I haven't just seen your message. Yeah.
okay.
I haven't seen your message. Can I check it today? Here. This one.
Right. So the problem here is like you put the URL of my pen, not your pen. So for today, make sure that you use your pen because I wasn't able to see your work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I need I save it here.
Yes.
How should I paste my URL?
So today, if you head back here, when we get to lab 2, up here, so we're going to be working on this one, then you'll submit your pen in here.
Oh, so I just paste this.
Yeah, just make sure that it's yours because with the last one, you gave me mine. Yeah. But no worries. But for now, like, I'm just going to do a little bit of review of this one here that we did last week. And then we'll switch over to lab 2. So this is what I'm looking at right now.
So that's your.
Yeah, this is me. When you see the purple, that's me. So be careful that you don't, submit my work rather than yours. Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit confused. Today we need to, for example, create my pen and I
Yeah.
just copy this URL to.
Be careful because that pen, this isn't saved yet. So this URL, it doesn't have like your profile,
Yeah,
like your ID in there. But if you put anything in, like whatever, and then you go save, see how that has you in there now?
Okay.
So this you would copy,
Okay.
and then when we get to lab 2, you could post it in here.
Alright.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I missed first week. So
Right.
is it possible to resubmit the first lab?
No, sorry. I should just give a blanket announcement real quick. Like last week is done. Last week is last week. No more changes. No submitting if you missed it. None of that. Okay? And it's not to be harsh, but it's more important that you keep going forward. You know, just pick it up and go from now on. Don't worry about last week, because I'll remind you, if we make good enough progress, we'll complete about 13 to 14 labs. But I only need 10 labs for your final grade, right? So you've got about 3 or 4 labs where if you aren't able to complete it or something like that, it won't really affect your grade as long as you're doing well in the rest. You know what I mean? So the one we did last week, like that can disappear if you do well moving forward. I think that's, pretty darn fair. The other good thing about this system is like partway through the semester, about halfway through, if you're doing well, you'll already have what you need to pass this class. And that's pretty good. You don't have to worry at the end, scrambling to try and produce something when you've got a bunch of other final projects. So hopefully that gives you a bit of relief on that front. But it does mean like each week you got to kind of keep up. All right. To the lesson. So for the moment, I'm just doing a little bit of review from last week, a little recap. Last week, we learned about this tool called React. This is what we're focusing on during the course. So there was actually 2 tools that we were using. One is called React, and the other one is called React DOM. React is used for creating components. React DOM is used for rendering those components onto the screen. Yeah, keep it down, guys. We're into our little review of last week. So, if you have a question, speak up for sure then. All right? So, no, we're digging in now. So let's get the gray matter rolling with a little review. So 2 tools that we are using, React and React DOM. React is for making components. React DOM is for rendering those components to the screen. So a few things we did last week. The script tags. So we need to load in the JavaScript for both of these tools. So we wind up having 2 script tags in here. You can see there's not a lot in the HTML, just a very, very basic HTML page, and one little placeholder div here. The way that React works is that you can write both your HTML and your JavaScript together over in the JavaScript area, which is really interesting. You're usually hopping back and forth between these sides here, and if you've been doing that a lot, you're probably used to it, but that's actually kind of difficult. In this little project, in this little example right here, for instance, if I want to put my username in the greeting here, the old way, I would have to create the element, and then I'd have to put something like span tags around the area that I want to make dynamic. And the only reason I'm putting that there is so that I can make a selector inside of the JavaScript for selecting that part of the HTML. And then once I've selected it, I have to write something that will overwrite what the value in there is, using something like inner HTML to change it up. And it winds up being a lot of steps. And you're doing that over and over and over and over again for a page that has, dynamic content on it. With React, we eliminate all of that stuff. It gives us a way that any area we want to make dynamic, we can just put curly braces in. And then we give it a variable and we're done, which is, it's a really nice system. So React has become very, very popular. It's a very in-demand skill to have right now. Employers cannot find people fast enough for doing React. The other framework that is really hot right now is Angular. I have been teaching Angular up to now. But my feeling, and I also consulted with a lot of like 7 businesses in Toronto, is that the emphasis is switching towards React. People are liking the way it does things a little bit more right now. So that's what we're going to be doing. So here's the situation here. Here's my little data, and you can see where I've created this variable called Bob. Now there's a word here that you may not have been using before, this little let. Have you guys used that before? Have you seen it? Because it's actually a kind of new addition to JavaScript, which brings me to the point of mentioning this. You see this little Babel here? The way that this is turned on is in the settings, clicking this little gear, and under JavaScript preprocessor, there's a bunch of tools, and we're using this one called Babel. Now, why are we doing that? Well, JavaScript got revised. JavaScript ES6 is the new standard, and it's actually been around since 2015. It was ratified in 2015, became the official JavaScript language. But it takes a little while for browsers to implement all the features of the new language. Where we are at now is like all browsers pretty much have the ES6 JavaScript built in. What Babel does is automatically convert your JavaScript to the older JavaScript if someone comes in a browser that can't support the new features. So let's say your grandma's on IE8 and wants to see what her grandkid has been doing in college, this will let her see it. So we turn that on, we have our 2 script tags, we're ready to rock in React. In the last class, we made a couple of simple components and then one slightly more complex component. Remember that? So if I scroll down a little bit here, you see this one called greeting, and we see this one called user info. They're pretty simple. They're just like 3 little lines of code here. And we have one more called settings, and it's got a little bit more in here. We see this constructor, we see this component did mount action going on here. And then this other one called render. And look at this. We've got the greeting and the user info inside of the render. This is the way it works with React. You make components and you compose them inside of other components. I think that's why people like it, because it's kind of like HTML. You know what I mean? You put divs inside of divs, inside of sections, and you compose it with kind of like a tree structure. And components work the same, except now they've got this extra ability of being able to do JavaScript inside of them and do dynamic data very easily, which is really nice. So today we're going to take it from the top. We're going to write a couple of components again. So we'll be doing some of those simple ones that we did in the first one, but we're going to do 2 or 3 more exercises to build on our knowledge of those and really understand the way that composition works in React. Yes, so const, which is also a new addition of ES6, it lets you make a variable that cannot be changed. The value cannot be changed when you create it with const. And the reason that that's useful is that a lot of bugs come from variables changing unexpectedly. So let's say you've got 2 pieces of code and they're both relying on this one variable, but this guy changes it. And this guy didn't expect that. And so now he's broken, and it's really hard to trace what the problem is. So when you declare it with const, that's you saying like, this doesn't need to change ever. So let's just not have it change. and then I eliminate a lot of bugs right away. So that's your const. The let is more similar to using var, but when you use let, it restricts who can change that variable. So inside of a function, for instance, so with my settings here, for example, see how there's an opening curly brace? At the end of it, there's a closing curly brace. If you use let inside of those curly braces to make your variable, it means that variable can only be changed inside those curly braces. So another piece of code out there won't be able to access it and change it. If you use var, any piece of code out there can get access to it and change it. So for a long time, people have been unhappy with JavaScript's use of var.
But you said, like, we use var as like global and local. So if you use local, we would be like using that inside the function, isn't it?
Let allows you to make it local, but the shame of JavaScript is that all vars are global. Yep, because of something called hoisting. And what happens is that even though you create the variable inside of there, it gets hoisted up the scope chain until it finally hits the window. And what's even worse is that if you forget the var keyword, it can overwrite variables up that scope chain. So it's been very problematic. Now, since ES6 came out, I almost never see var used. Developers just don't use it anymore. They default to using const wherever possible, and then let where it makes sense. If you know this variable is going to need to change, let is the better choice. That's a really good question. There's a great video. The YouTube channel is called Fun Function. I recommend it. That guy's awesome, and he has a great video about let and const, and it really explains it, and he goes through a bunch of examples. So that's a great question. Anybody else? All right, cool. Okay, so let's say we get into today's lesson. We'll do a little bit more composition, and we'll run through 3 or 4 exercises of composition just to really drive home how this all works. So I'm going to bounce over to lab 2 now, and you guys should make a new pen. Fresh, clean slate. Here we go. So make yourself a new pen, go to lab 2 and submit it. And we'll just, one more time we'll walk through getting our environment set up, and then we'll make we're going to work on a list view today. So the way that we're going to do it is we're going to start off by just making one component for a list item. Then we're going to see how we can take that one list item and put it in another component that duplicates it into a full list. Then we're going to take that component and put it in a third component that would have the ability to reach out to a database or get the information from somewhere else. And that'll be like a really nicely done React component. We'll just go step by step and explain the steps as we go. Nice. People are checking in. It's cool. I can see, how close we are to getting everybody's pens. So we're almost halfway. Our ratings are going up. I love this show. So a couple things from the last lab that tripped some folks up. You're in the wrong place. You want to be at,
So
you're going to app.
Oh.
Yes. Boop. There we go. Yeah.
Why should I do? Because there has
So if you click here
Okay.
and go lab 2,
Oh, sorry.
there we go. And now you've got a place you can submit. Yeah. Now be careful. You have to save it because if you don't save,
Yep.
then see how that has you in there now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Get it. Thank you.
Yeah. Just a couple things I was going to mention from the submissions last week. Be careful that you don't give me my pen. That happened a few times. So I need yours, not the professor mode session. My professor mode sessions always have that purple bar on the top. So you can see that if it's mine.
So we have to submit our new code pen in here.
Yep. Now remember to save it. So click on yours. And don't forget you have to save and watch the URL. See how it now has your name in there?
All right.
Yeah. That was the other thing I was going to mention. When you make your new pen, make sure you save it. If you're watching the URL, when you save it, it now puts your ID in there, right? Because if you submit it without having saved it at least one time, we won't see your work. So just be careful. What's that? Oh, snap! Let me. Here, let me double check something. Kosar. Here we go. Ah, I see. Okay. Okay. Let me jump into farmers.
Sorry for the trouble.
That's okay. Let's get in here. Do you know what? We are actually working on, we are building our own code editor. So one day when you guys come in, there won't be any pens to do. You'll just like, boom, be right in there.
Is it going to be used this semester?
I really hope we'll have it up by about lab 5, but we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
Depending how crazy busy it gets. Oh, come on, network.
And do you think you can cover up today, like how we can put files out? Like I wanted to use images, but I didn't know how, since I haven't.
In a
used it.
component?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like a file that you have on your desk. That's
Right.
like a file on the internet.
Right.
So I didn't know like how to do this.
Uh-huh, yeah. Actually, one of the students in my other group, do you know Amina? Amina?
Amina, I can. Yeah, I think she's in the WhatsApp group. I can find out who she is.
She did it, and with some help from Adam. So I could actually show you from her lab, yeah, which would be neat. Okay, let's see. So we are in 420, SBB, and oh, that's not the feedback. We want the submissions. And let me just double check down here to get your ID. That's you. So let me grab your, whoop. Let me not delete you. Yeah, that's the one. So that's lab 1, but we want lab 2. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to blank this out, and then when you go back, you should see the input field again. Bump. try that. He's probably just not open. You know what I mean?
Start today.
Then that would do it. Let's see here. Hey, good guess. So let me grab this.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
if I want to see that piece of code that you said you got to share, is it going to be shared as like?
Yeah, I'll bring it up in class. Yeah. All right. Looking good. Is Yarong Zhang, are they here? Anybody? Samantha Lem? All right. Looks like we're pretty much ready to go. Okay. Let me bring up my professor mode session here. So I need to set up my environment for working with React. So I need my, it's learning time. It's time for the knowledge. Let's do this. Oh, there's no feature for resubmitting. Because it wasn't saved, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, come with me. Let's fix it up real quick. Sorry, what is your name?
Xue Li, G-U-I.
J-U-I? Like this?
Oh, G-U-E, sorry.
Oh, J-U-E? And then Li? Yeah, there we go. So let me grab this ID for you. Copy this. Then I can find what you submitted. Boom. That looks like it right there. Yep. So I'll get rid of this, and then you should be able to resubmit.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It takes a little getting used to. Okay, so what's my first step, guys? I want to do some work in ES6 with React. What do I need to do in my HTML? Anyone? You? Yeah, we need a placeholder div. That's what we're going to insert our React application into. So let me make a real basic page here. So a little bit of HTML action. There we go. Some HTML there. I'll throw a head tag in there just to be polite. I'll throw a body tag in there. Again, basic stuff, and then a div. And I'm going to give it an ID that I'm just calling app. And that's pretty much it, because React is going to generate all the rest of it for us. But if I want to work with React, I am going to need my script tags. So the way I like to get my script tags, there's a nice convenience built into CodePen. If you get used to this little gear beside the JavaScript box here, when I click that, there's this thing at the bottom called Quick Add. See that one? And if I click that, these are basically all the most popular JavaScript frameworks and tools and so forth. So like, this is a nice way to be up to date with what people are using right now. And they review and change this up every once in a while. So I need two things out of here. The first one is going to be React. And see how it gives me the URL right here? So what I like to do is just grab this and stick it into a script tag. So I'll go down to the bottom of the body. I'll make my script tag, give it a source property, and pump. Close it out. So that's one. And I need that second one as well. So the second one is called React DOM, right there. There we go. And I'll get my second script tag in there. So source equals, and there's my React DOM URL. So far, so good. That'll get me the JavaScript that I need.
Where do you get the second source?
I usually click on the gear and then
Is that one?
go quick add and see there's React DOM.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I grab it from there.
Right.
It's pretty handy. I could never remember those URLs. So. Now, can you guys tell me what is the other thing I need to do there?
I'll copy into the HTML.
Yeah, so copy that,
Yeah.
and then close that. And then in your HTML, give yourself a script tag.
Oh, I didn't type the script tag for me.
Yeah, script tag, basically like this. Yeah. The other thing I'll mention for you guys, if you have the professor mode session open, you can copy this. Like, you can actually select and copy things from the professor mode session if you have that open. So, I mean, you probably don't want to just copy all my code, but something like the URL or whatever, if you want, you can copy it out of here and paste it into yours. But there's one more step, and this actually did catch a couple of people the last time, is I have to turn on Babel, that Babel tool we were talking about. And the way that we do that is, again, through the little gear here, but there's another option we use. So I'm clicking on the gear. This time I'm looking at JavaScript preprocessor in there. Go right to the bottom, and we select Babel. Save and close. So not too bad, right? So like 2 steps basically to get up and running. That's pretty nice. It's another reason why people are kind of heading over to React. It's fairly simple to get up and running, so it's pretty good. So you're looking for Babel being here, and you've got your script tags. Now I'm ready to rock. So I put a couple of notes in here on what we're going to be doing. We're going to start with the most basic one. We're going to make one functional component. And I'll talk about the differences between the 2 styles of components we can do, functional components and class-based components. So let's start off with something simple just to get rocking. Okay, so I gotta put a little note for myself. Make a functional component for an announcement. So I'm sort of thinking about, like, because I was just recently working on the announcement section on Leaflet, I was thinking about this while I was doing it. And let me just kind of sketch what I'm thinking of here. I mean, most sites and applications, they have some kind of announcements area, right? So let's say I'm building a site that is for purchasing concert tickets or something like that. Announcements are going to be pretty important there. People are probably going to be checking in regularly to see new concerts and stuff. So what's the minimum stuff they're going to want to see in an announcement? To me, it's probably going, like at the most basic, it's probably going to be like a title area and a description, right? So we'll have this thing up top here that's a little bolder. Then we'll have this little area down here that's got a little bit more information. And it'll probably be things like, you know, notice all headbangers. Motley Crue returns from the grave for one more concert. Or something like that. You know what I mean? Just to get people excited about it. So let's work on just this. It'll probably be fairly straightforward for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is, now that I've got Babel turned on, I'm safe to use the const, like this. Then I'm going to give my component a name. I'll call it announcement. And then watch the syntax, guys. It's a little different from the older JavaScript. I'm going to say equals props. Today we're going to talk about that props a little bit more in depth. And then here's the new thing. Equals and a greater. This is called an arrow function. In ES6, this is the way generally that you're going to create functions. It's much more concise. You don't have to type out the word function all the time, which is kind of nice.
I don't know what is it in the props. What is it working for?
That's a very good question. In a few minutes, we're going to go into that a little more. Just to give you a preview, the props are used to give information into our component. It's like a little doorway we can use to pass information into the component. So this component needs to know a title and a description. Today we're going to learn how to pass that info into it through the props. If we're able to do that, it means we can use this component many times to make a whole list of announcements. So that's a good question. That's what we're after. Brett?
So this arrow function takes place of just saying function.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Instead of running function.
Yep, exactly. There's a little more to it. It solves some of the problems that functions used to have in JavaScript to do with scope. I'll show you some examples of that, but I can give you a scenario, for example. When you click a button, right? You add, to know about a button being clicked, you add a listener to it, right? You do like an on-click or something like that. And let's say you want your function to take some action when the person clicks on that button. And in that function, you use the keyword this. The problem is that this, when the event is coming from the button, now refers to the button. So it can't find the code that you want to do. When you do arrow functions, it makes sure that the word this is talking about the actual code you are writing, not the button, but the actual code you are writing, which solves many, many problems. Probably shouldn't get into that too much, but maybe in a class or two, I might show some examples of that. I'll say this, everyone is flooding over to doing it this way because a lot of the pain and bugs and stuff like that just go away, which is, people have been wanting this for a long, long time. So I'm glad that I'm finally able to show it. So then, you know, if it's a function, we know we need some curly braces, right? Now we get into some of the magic of React, because we get to do something we have not really been able to do before, which is writing HTML inside our JavaScript. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to say return and put some round brackets. Now inside of my round brackets, watch what we can do. We did this last week, but I still enjoy this. I'm going to say like maybe an H3. You see that? I'm literally able to just go ahead and type out HTML, even though I'm working in the JavaScript. This is done using what they call JSX, right? So JSX has been built into JavaScript for a long time, but nobody ever really used it until the Facebook team came up with this idea. And now it's becoming very popular. So give that a try. Now, you notice that we don't have it showing on the screen yet. That's step 2. That's where we use our other tool, the one called React DOM. So to get it showing up on the screen, let's go all the way down to the bottom, because putting it on the screen is pretty much the last thing that we want to do here. And here, I'm going to use that new React DOM. And that library, its most important function is called render. And the render function takes 2 properties. The first one is our component. Now, watch how we can use our component now. See how it's called announcement? Well, down here in the renderer, announcement becomes basically a custom HTML element. That's crazy, right? We just wrote our own custom HTML element that you can use just like any HTML element now. That's pretty awesome. Now, it's not showing on the screen yet, and you can see I've got a little red warning down here. And the reason why is because I need that second parameter. React needs to know where it should render this on the page. So to do that, it's pretty simple. We can just do a simple little selector. So there's 2 ways I could do this. The first one would be maybe like a get element by ID. And see my little placeholder div over here on the left? This is why we made that. Because now I can select that div and hey, check it out. We've got some concert announcement. The other way of doing your selector that you might want to get used to because it's much more powerful that I showed last week. This is something I'm really liking, is this one called query selector. A query selector can take any kind of CSS selector That's pretty nice, right? Because you can use the same selectors as you would do in your CSS. So if I wanted to style something that has an ID in CSS, I'd go like pound and the name of the ID, curly braces, and then I could put my styles in there, right? Or if it's a class, I would do like dot and the name of the class and put my styles in there. So you can literally copy your CSS styles and use them as selectors in JavaScript with the query selector. Very powerful. It's great. Now, believe it or not, that's that's a component. That is a fully working React component.
What is when I'm acting without this button, this sign, and it just appear?
Oh, when you're using get element by ID, you don't need the pound
So,
because it only can select an ID.
or either I go query selector, so I.
That's right. If you decide to use the query selector, then you need that because this one can also select by class or element or many, many different things. So. I like this one just because it's powerful. I can do so many things with it.
I figured it out both ways.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Just so I can have it in my notes.
Yeah.
This one appears to work, but as soon as I saved it again, it all of a sudden disappears.
Let's see. Query
This one looks
selector. That looks pretty good. Can you check your console and see if any errors showing up in there?
expect.
Yeah. And then console. Ooh.
Oh.
Ah.
I can't.
I think you've got a typo in there.
Do I? And then.
Inducement.
Oh.
That's it. There we go. No huge mystery. The other thing we can do, guys, is don't forget, if you have an issue, you can drop your URL in the chat window here, and we can debug it together. So then everybody sees, because if you're having the problem, guaranteed 4 or 5 more people are having the same problem. Does anybody want to do a quick debug? Well, yes. Dr. Scott. Let's check it out. Okay, so we've got the little arrow showing up here. Scott, is this saved? Where's Scott? Is Scott here? I think Scott's just tuning in online. I don't think he's physically here. The bastard. We had to get up so early, drag our asses down here. All right, so let's fix him up. So the first problem is that this is not complete right down here. So let's see what's missing. We've got the head, we've got body, but we're missing the closing of the body, right? Oh, maybe it's down further, yeah. Oh, what a jerk. Hold on. He's messing with me. There we go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So let's go over and check out the JavaScript. If you click the little red dot here, it tries to tell you what it thinks the problem is. Okay, this is a problem. So right here, this is for HTML. That's an HTML notes field, not JavaScript. So it's not going to let us do that. And it's not going to let us do that. It can be a little confusing, right? Because it looks like HTML, but it's actually JavaScript. So we can't do like an HTML style notes field over in here. Now let's see what it thinks is going on. Okay. Okay, this is a little further. I'm going to catch up with this shortly because this is a little further along than we are right now. So if you're listening, Scott, just sit tight on that, and I will come back to this. Remind me in like half an hour. Boom. Anybody else want me to take a quick look? It's, feel free to use this because if I'm stopping and going to each station like that, it will really slow things down and you guys will get bored and unhappy. So, do you want to throw something in there? Yeah. So with the get element by ID, it's only ever going to be able to select an ID. It's no good if you need to select a class or select something by its element name or by its attributes or anything like that. Whereas the query selector will let you do all that. Any selector you could write in CSS will work with the query selector. So what I do lots of times is I'll actually write, if it's a little bit of a tricky selector, like I need to find an element that's inside of some other elements or something, I'll write it in CSS first. And I'll just do something like color red. And as soon as I see the thing I'm trying to select go red, then I know, okay, that selector is good. I copy it and paste it into a query selector, and now I can select it with JavaScript. It's very nice. I love it. It's one of my favorite additions that they've done. That's a good question. Anybody else? Yeah, Jay? If you bring up the professor mode session there, you should see a little chat window available. There's a link to the professor mode session in the lab on Leaflet. If you click the green link on the right. So just while we're, expecting a couple more of these to come through, let's talk about this little component here, right? So one of the questions we get last week is like, well, why are we doing it this way? What's the advantage? Oh, we're just doing it in the HTML. Well, I want to show you that right now because it's a pretty big advantage. Chances are that my concert announcement is not just going to be some concert announcement. It's going to be something like Aerosmith is coming to Toronto or something like that, right? So, oh, there's Jay. Okay, I'll be with you in 1 second there, Jay. All right, so let's go up here. And last week we did something like this. We created another little variable by making a const. And let's call it like dummy title equals, and I'll say Aerosmith. I don't even like Aerosmith. I don't know, when I'm in front of people I choke, right? Let's get someone good coming to Toronto. Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now we're talking. You guys like the Chili Peppers? It's a good concert. I didn't see the video. Yeah, the song looks good. I just wish it'd be like a full album. I guess they made their dough. So watch what we can do, guys. I put the curly braces right here. And in here, I can put that variable in. Boom, now it's Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? And whatever I change this variable to, this will update. So this is the thing people really like about React, because to do that, if I was doing it the regular way, would be a fair number of steps, right? Like I'd have to make a special element around it and give it something like an ID, and then I'd have to select it by the ID, and then I'd have to set its inner HTML property and a few more things like that. Whereas now we replace all of that just with curly braces. And you can put these curly braces in anywhere that you want. Like you can even stick them inside of the H3 here if you want to give it extra attributes. I'm going to put a second field on here because I don't want just the title. I also want some little description area. Now this leads us to kind of the one rule of JSX in components. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to get an error here right away. If I put a paragraph and it'll be like some description, here. You see how I get an error right away? And if I click it, it says adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. You guys from last week, do you remember that one? So how do we fix that one? Yeah, that's right. We have to have a single root element with every component we make. I don't totally know why, but I don't know. But I do know there's no exceptions to that rule. So here's what I want you guys to do. See if you can get the description dynamic. I've got Red Hot Chili Peppers. You know, I'm going to have some announcement down there like concert date at this venue, that type of thing. I want you guys to see if you can get this to be dynamic. And while you're doing that, I'm going to do a quick debug here. Let's take a look at Mr. JD. All right, so let's see. We do have a little error, warning down here. But I'm looking here, Jay, the first things that I check is like, do we have our script tags? We totally do. Do we have our placeholder div? Absolutely. Is Babel turned on? Yes. So the setup is all good. Oh, Wu-Tang Clan. Nice, nice. All right, let me check what it thinks the problem is. Oh, this is exactly what we were just talking about. So there's two elements in here, the H3, and now this paragraph. So what we got to do, Jay, is put both of these inside of a single root element, like a div. You could also use something like a section, or even like an li. Okay, so that gets rid of that. That's great. Another thing I'll point out, Jay, see how your variable here is called fake title? But up here it's called the message, sorry. Oh, never mind me. You're absolutely right with that. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong spot and I thought you had a typo in your variable, but it's okay because I look here and there's fake title, so that's good. So this all looks good to me. So I'm going to go down and check the renderer right here. Ah, is this it? Maybe that is, oh snap. This is totally not your fault, dude. I should mention one more thing about these React components. They have to start with a capital letter. That is something we haven't come across up to now. And that's another one of the rules of React. So it's got to start with a capital. And then down here, it's got to start with a capital. Okay. Now what else? There's something. Oh, there it is. Good. Nice. There we go. So here's what I'm going to do. And take note of this because sometimes in your feedback, people will do this. I will make a fork of Jay's work here. And see how the URL changes to say oddly Timbot? So now I can copy this and send it back to Jay so he can look at how I got it working, right? So sometimes you'll see forks in your feedback. I'm going to send you a fork, Jay. But I think you got it. So it was really just that capital letter. And we actually didn't talk about that. So, you know, one of the benefits of debugging stuff together, now everyone got to see that. Okay, did you guys get your description showing up?
There's another construct.
Yep.
Use dummy title.
Yep.
And this one we don't need to make it capital. Because it works, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this can.
one is fine.
That's fine. Yeah.
Because of it's not like function here.
That's right. That's right. It's just a variable. So variables usually do start with a lowercase letter. Yeah. I don't know why they make us do capitals on the component, but they do. Yeah. So now we're going to see if we can get the description to be dynamic. So the simple way to do it, guys, it's pretty much the same as the way I did the title. So let me throw a const in here, and I'll say dummy description equals Pepper's coming to Toronto at the Sky Dome. I still call it Sky Dome, damn it. It will always be the Sky Dome. We voted on that. Sorry, I'm bitter about the Rogers takeover of Sky Dome. So can you guys guess how I would put it in here? Curly braces, dummy description, and there we go. That's working. Okay. So I want to show you something new. We're going to work with this little guy, props, here. So I mentioned that props is a way of passing into our component the information that we need. Now we know what information we need for this component, right? We need a title, and we need a description. The React library. Let us set some default values for our title and our description. It looks like this. Follow along with me here. So inside of here, we can set defaults for Okay, so right now, instead, this is our first case of using that props. So up in here to concert description. This kind of nicely illustrates the benefit of using component. Well, it's concert announcement. Selling t-shirts, right? Well, I could use this because I can to say like t-shirt usable. Really, it was just typo stuff. No big deal. All right, Nancy. Let's see what Nancy's got going on. Oh, you got it? When you paste something. There's something? Okay, let me take a look.
I did it. The first two worked, but
Yeah.
the last two for when and where.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so something. Oh, okay. Okay, cool, cool. So you're all good there. All right, great. So it seems like everybody's doing pretty good so far here. So this is a really important principle to understand about these props here. These are basically parameters. If you're writing a function, you know how in the round brackets you can put parameters in there and that lets you put information into the function? That's basically what we're doing here. What you pass in can be used inside of your HTML here. That makes our component very reusable. Somebody had a question? Go sorry. Uh-huh. Yes. Now, you saw, if I remove props, it's going to go looking elsewhere. And in this case, it'll find them because we put these right on the top. We put it in the window, basically. So it'll just keep looking until it eventually finds these, and it'll use it. But the second we say, no, look in your... It's literally like passing what it needs and saying, look in your box. I gave you what you need. And it opens it up and says, oh, here's a title, here's a description. Blah. And then the renderer renders it.
So you don't need the counts.
No, those could go away now.
But if you create a new one, so you have counts announcement, and then you have the default props for announcement. If you change that name to whatever, it won't work.
Because the next thing, see our next little thing down here, is we're going to figure out how do we have multiples of this. Right now we've got just the one, which is like not so useful for us. So let's go ahead and make our second component. Then we're going to put this one inside of that second one. And I'm going to show you how to duplicate it for as many as you need. Then we'll have a nice little list view going on.
Why would you use default props? Is it just like a static message? This is just your site? Or why would you use it?
As we continue, you'll see that it's really easy to forget to pass into the props what the thing needs to do its job. So if I'm going down my list of concert announcements and I suddenly see the default value, I'm like, I've got a problem. Something is not right there.
So this would not overwrite whatever?
No. These will only show up if you don't give something to the props, which is it's probably better than just it being blank or not showing anything to the user. At least there'll be something there. And for me as the developer, it helps me find where I missed something. So we're doing good. We're doing good. We're going to make a second component now. It's also going to be one of these functional components. We're going to call this one, I'm going to call it the announcement list. Okay, so let me put a little note for myself here. I'm going to call the list. It's the same. Equals a possible, just to see if it's up and running. Here's what I can do. I can actually use my init values. I haven't actually given them any props. So now I want to start customizing each one of these with the particular concert announcement. So let me show you how we do that. And you'll start to see how these props work. This is really neat. Let me take my first one, and I'll say dummy title equals, see that? Oh my god, love React. You can pass things into the props as attributes of this custom element you've made. So you can now update each one of these to whatever content that you want. Can you make the description in there as well? It works the same. In here, I'll say dummy description equals, I got nothing. But there it is. This also gives you kind of an idea of how that default props works. If my component gets a value, it'll use it. But if it doesn't get anything, it'll use the default props. That's pretty nice. It means that you can be pretty selective with how you do this. And it also means that if you are working on styling, you'll always have some nice content in there that you can see how your styles are looking. This is getting pretty good now. But, so are you guys pretty cool with that? You get that working good? So the next thing that I would start thinking about is like, well, what if I have like 50 concert announcements? You know, this, like, typing in these tags down here for 50 concerts, that's going to be a drag. I don't want to have to do all that. But maybe you already are thinking like, it looks like HTML, but we're actually in JavaScript over here. In JavaScript, we can do loops. So why don't we make a loop that will create all of the announcements we need? So we're going to do it in 2 steps. The first step, we're going to create a little collect about our concerts or whatever we're doing. So what do we have in JavaScript for collections? Probably the most used one is the array. You guys are familiar with arrays now. So why don't we do an array? We'll put all of our concerts in there, and then we'll see if we can make a loop that will stamp out all of the components that we need. Sounds good? Now as we do it, I'm going to show you a new kind of loop called a map. It's very nice. You'll find a lot of the stuff in the ES6 JavaScript is very concise and shorter. It's less typing and very powerful. Maps are no exception to that. So let's start with making our data. So right up here in the start of our announcement list, I've got a couple of options. I could use a const, I could use a let. Either one will get the job done. I'm going to go with the const just because I don't think these announcements are really going to be changing, you know? I'm going to use them as is. So I'm going to say const, and I'll call it data equals. So you guys remember how we make an array? Square brackets. So now here's what I want to do. I want to make an array of objects, if that makes any sense. So my array is going to contain a bunch of little objects. And the reason I'm saying objects is because each one of my concerts needs a title and description. So that's a good place to use an object. So let me just make one of them and inside of my array, and you'll get the idea. So curly braces to make an object. And then in here, I can put dummy title. And I'll give it a value here, like, I'll just say like title1 or something, just for now. And then a comma will let me put the dummy description. There we go. So that'll be what I need for my first announcement. And then I can basically make 2 or 3 more like that. But let me show you what people will do typically with this. Like this can start getting really long, but you are allowed to put line breaks in. So I'll put a break here, and I'll put a break here. And now I can put in as many concert announcements as I want just by putting a little comma after it. A couple more concert announcements in here. To take note of here, this last little comma, you want to remove. The comma means I'm putting in one more item. So when you get to the end, you have to remove it. Otherwise, you could see a warning or an error in your console. It's getting pretty good. So nothing has changed down here yet, but in the next step, we're going to do something pretty powerful. Okay. Guys got your data ready? Good to go? Okay. So here's what we're going to do, guys. I'm going to delete these 3 announcements here, because now we're going to redo it with a loop, with a little bit of JavaScript in here. Now, when we're working inside of the JSX here, the little HTML kind of stuff, the way that we insert a bit of JavaScript is always by putting some curly braces. That is like you cutting a hole in that HTML to stick some JavaScript in there. If you've done any like PHP stuff, you know, this is a very common kind of thing to do in PHP. But doing this on the browser side rather than the server side is relatively new. So this is pretty modern stuff you guys are learning now. So I'm ready to put some JavaScript in here. I'm just going to do this, and then I'll talk about it. I kind of need to finish this whole one line of code, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing here. But here's what it's going to look like. I'm going to say data.map. I'm going to put a round bracket. I'm going to say item. I'm going to put an arrow function. And then I'm going to put in my announcement. Dummy title equals item dot dummy title dummy description equals item dot dummy description and then I got to close out my announcement. I'm just going to make my JavaScript bigger because we don't really need the HTML right now. Oh, snap. I think it's already working. Check it out. What error have I got? I don't really believe this error because it does seem to be Yeah, there, it's gone. Yeah. Okay, so if you missed it, it's already working. These guys actually are now coming from my data. See that? Title 1, Title 2, Title 3. I should have made them more interesting, but so what we've done in this single line of code is make a loop that is generating those components we need. So if you forget about the rest of it for a moment and just look at our announcement, see? That's exactly what we did a minute ago by hand. And there's the dummy title and description. But see that they are now looking for their values in something called item. Well, where's item coming from? It's being made right here. The way that a map works with an array, it simply loops through the entire array and calls each one of these items item right here. So this is us saying, okay, look at the data and map it. Map it means loop through the entire data. Every time you find an object in here, you're going to call it item so that I can use it for my announcement. You know? So our first one, the first time the loop runs, it gets this first object, and it says, okay, I want to call this object item. When we create our announcement, it's saying, oh, okay, look in that item. Do you have dummy title? Yes, I do. It's title 1. So title 1 becomes the value here. And automatically, it shows up. Pretty slick, right? I love that shit. Like, oh man, when I think of all the work I have to do, if I'm manually doing that the old way, God. Now, this is pretty powerful here. This becomes even more powerful, and you'll see this in the coming lessons, because usually this data we'd be getting from something like Firebase, right? So you can think of my announcements box on Leaflet there. It is doing this, but it's getting the data from Firebase. But the principle is the exact same. And in a few classes, you guys will be able to do the same. Not bad, not bad. How are we doing on time? How much time do I have? 35 minutes is pretty good. We can do one more thing in 30 minutes. But are you guys pretty good so far on that? So as a side note, here's what I'll say. If you know, not to harp on this, I just want to make sure everybody gets it. If your reviewer looks at your thing and sees Title 1, Title 2, Title 3, they're going to be like, you know, they don't want to see that 30 times. They want to see your creativity with this, like you're doing something interesting with it. It doesn't take that much time. You should spend that time. And the more you do it, like the easier this stuff will get. It'll be on your brain the next time we're here in a lab. So we're going to do one more thing. This little note here says compose the functional components into a class-based component. Now, we made one of those in the last lab. Do you remember? It was the one called settings. So in that code, we did it a little bit differently. We didn't do this const and then the name of the component here. And the reason why is because we're making the second type of component that React can do. A class-based component is a more powerful component. It has more features built into it, Well, these can be used very, very well for things like connecting to a database. So if you're sort of following the train of thought here, our first component, super simple. You know, just put some stuff on the screen. Our second component adds the ability to loop through data and use that first component to make a list. Now we're adding on the ability to do things like talk to a database to get the data, which gets given to the list, and then the list does its thing, generating all of our little simple components. It's nice, right? It's like each step is adding on a little bit more capability here. So we're now getting to like kind of the ultimate capability. Let's start making this little class-based component we want to use. All right. So it looks a little bit different. I'm going to go down here. And this one's going to be a little different from the others. I'm going to say class. And I'm going to call it announcement box. And here's how we turn it into like one of these powerful components. We say extends React.component and curly braces. You guys remember from the last class, I was talking about what this extends does? And very simply, it allows you to take an existing piece of code. So this is in that React library that we're loading in. It allows us to take that and just add a little more functionality on top of it. So we get all of the power and features that the Facebook developers have built, but then we can add a little more on top of it to do what we want to do. So remember, like, the fingers extend the hand. So the fingers by themselves, they're pretty good, right? Like they can do this, but that's not great. But the fingers extend this, and by doing this, well, it's getting better, and this extends this, so now it's getting like, it's getting like pretty powerful the more we extend it. So behind the scenes, like there's a kind of a whole extension chain going on that we're putting something on top of. Okay? So that extension chain gives us a few things built in already. Let me show you a few of them. One is called the constructor. And I'll put a couple of notes to describe what each of these functions do. So the constructor runs as soon as this component comes alive. Basically, as soon as it's in memory, the constructor will run. We've got another one called render. So this one lets me give something to the React DOM renderer. We've got another one, which is called component did mount. And this one happens when my stuff is rendered to the screen. And there's one more, which is called component will unmount. I know I'm typing a little fast. I'm going to pause in a second. But I wanted you to see all of them. So this one happens when the component is being removed from the screen. So when might that happen? Well, let's say we were on the home page and now we're changing and we're navigating over to the products or something. Well, all those components on the home page, they're all going to go away. So this is a good place to do any kind of cleanup we need to do, like removing listeners and getting rid of timers or anything like that. Because otherwise, those things might hang around in the background running in memory. And over time, the application starts getting slower and chuggy. Chuggy's a word. So these things all together, guys, they have a name. This is called the component life cycle. It means that this style of component is kind of aware of what's going on, right? Like it knows when it's about to be born in the constructor. Exciting. Component life cycle, yeah. So if you're doing any Google searches or whatever, that term will show you a lot of good information. So yeah, so I mean, it is kind of like the life and death cycle here. This is like the circle of life. This is it right here, right? Because right here, it's like, oh, I'm going to be born. Yay. What am I going to be? I can put properties in here, that are going to be needed during the life of this thing. Then here, it's like, I need to show something on the screen. That's my purpose. And here, it's like, I just fulfilled my purpose. Stuff is on the screen. Do I need to do anything now that stuff is on the screen? And then down here, it's like, well, my time is done. Time for me to go. I should put my affairs in order. And that's it, right? So these components are kind of semi-smart. You'll hear them actually called smart components. So the reason why we want to use this one is because let's say we have that scenario where we want to get our concert announcements from Firebase. This guy would be a good guy to do it because maybe in our constructor, we put the URL of our Firebase application. And then as soon as we know that it's on the screen, it's active in the component did mount, we start asking for that data from Firebase, right? So that's kind of the purpose of this thing. So the best way to work with these class-based components is in their renderer, they don't really do a lot themselves. They work with our dumb components. So what I'm going to do is in the renderer of this, I'm going to put our class list component. So this guy's job is just going to be to get data and give it to the class list. If we want to give data to our dumb component, what do we use to do that? Did you say props? The props, right? All along, that's what we've been doing. Our little announcement, it uses its props just to get one announcement, title and description. Our class list is going to get all the announcements in its props and then run its loop to give each of them to one of the announcements.
I know you've kind of already explained this, but I'm just having some trouble wrapping my head around what props is exactly. Like, what is it?
Props.
Represent and what is it? Like, I know it's necessary, but I'm not sure exactly.
No, that's a really good question because they kind of hide that from you. to be more magical. But in reality, props is just an object. Instead of props, you could put curly braces there, and it's just a regular object. So one of these, literally the props, if you were to take a look at it, looks like this. So no different than what we wrote up here. Props is just an object like that. How can I, what React is doing for us is automatically creating an object that can be given to every component. That's the way they set it up to work. Now, they had to give it some name, so they called it props, because it sounds like properties. So if you think of an HTML element, when you give it attributes, those are called properties, right? So think of an image tag. It has an attribute source. That's a property. You give it a URL, and it knows to go to the URL to load that image. So they called it props. It doesn't. It's exactly. So it's always empty unless we put something in it. So there's a couple ways we can do that. One is by using that little default props that we did. That will make sure that it's not empty, that we always give something to the component. The second way is we can put something in the props by an attribute. So remember when we made our announcement and we physically typed in dummy title and dummy description? That's the second way we can put something into that object. And we're kind of still doing it that way right now, but just with a loop. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. Because that tripped me up in the beginning too. I'm like, what is this thing? And it's actually much simpler than it seems. Most things about React, I expect them to be so complex because all these people are like, oh my God, React, it's the best thing ever. And then when I use it, I'm like, well, it's cool, but it's not that crazy. You know, if you compare that to Angular, with Angular, it's an entire framework. So you kind of have to know everything about Angular before you can really do some stuff. But we're already doing something fairly cool here with React. It's simpler, I think. So. All right, cool. So let me do this in steps. Yeah.
Excuse me, last time you write the super in the...
Oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, what does it mean, the super?
So super lets this one, here, let me. Because we are extending React component, when we say super, we're actually talking to React component. We're talking to the parent of this thing. So this is like the child here. Our announcement box is just being born from the React component, and he wants to talk to his dad and say, hey, Dad, I'm born. You know, the baby's born, it cries, and the parent's like, what do I need to do? That's what's happening here. When we call super, it's our component telling the parent that it's alive. I'm here now.
So we always need to write super?
Yes. So let me put it in there right now. Do you see how my error went away? If I don't have the super, see how I've got a warning? As soon as I put super, it's gone. So that was very good. I'm glad you're taking notes. So like we usually do, guys, we're going to do the most basic version of this possible, and then we will make it a little better. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into my render here and put my announcement list component. That's what we want to render out from this component. So now we'll have a structure where we have our announcement, then it's inside of announcement list. Announcement list is inside of announcement box now. So everything about React is composition. Planning your composition like this. So let me do the render thing. Okay, so be careful about this, guys. Even though we're inside of this render function, you still need to do a return. So in that way, it's a little bit similar to our functional components. So there we go. And then I'm going to put the announcement list into there. Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. Let's take a look. All right. No, it's good. That is good. So let's see what it thinks the problem is. Okay. This is looking a little funky down here. Yeah, what's going on here? So class announcement box extends React component looks pretty good to me. So I wonder if there's a problem further up. Let me make sure that the closing curly brace is in there. Let's see. It looks like it, right? Because that one's got the underline. And that looks pretty good. So let's see, is this data closed? Yeah, it looks like it.
Yep.
Did someone spot it?
Oh, there's a last one.
Okay, let's get rid of that one. There might be something else in here. Let's see. That was a good catch, though. Appreciate it. So here's our opening and closing div. That looks pretty good. And so this is, I like what you're doing here, right? Because see how he's got some other properties going on? He's got titles, but now he's also putting dates and locations. That's awesome. Equals iron description. That looks pretty good. What are you not liking? Done React component. Maybe this guy doesn't have a closing.
Yeah, it's after I started doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me.
Let me try something brutal just for a minute. Oh, look at these guys too.
Yes.
They're all acting up. Yeah, okay. I wonder, let me try something. I'm going to just cut this out for a second and see if that gets rid of it. If it does, then we know this is our problem area. So, okay. So it is something right in here. So, I mean, this should be fine. It's just a note, but let me trim that down. Class announcement. What is it not liking? There's something right in here that. So, so let me try this. Let me get rid of all of the guts of this and see if that fixes it.
Isn't it the capital C?
Did you see something? This one here? Well, that should be a capital C. So it's something inside, because when I remove the inside, that gets rid of it. Constructor, is that spelled right? Render component demand. Constructor. You know what? I think maybe it wants that super. Boom. That's what it is.
But why is the class announcement boxes all in white?
Every once in a while, the IDE screws up the code coloring. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, every once in a while. And that's true of all IDEs. Sometimes they just get confused. If you think about it, it's pretty complex what they're doing with that code coloring.
Sure.
Another time that you come to this, like if you refreshed a few times, it would probably clear up.
Good.
Ah, there you go.
We're still white, but it's
Why you always alert?
We try to delete the super and then the problem will not appear. But
What?
class announcement.
That's
when we both try this
interesting.
way, and
Should I work? So,
Oh, because this should be constructor. That's it. Yeah. That was a good question. You had me for a minute there. Like, what's going on? Okay, so this is almost ready for the screen. Man, this is cool though. Look what this dude's doing. I just want to take a look at this. What? Well, shit. I'm going to have to step it up, man, with my Times New Roman default fonts and shit. This is nice, dude. You guys start to see the power of this, right? I feel sometimes like my shitty in-class examples don't really convey all you can do with this. Once you start dropping some styles on it, mint. But that's your job. That's up to you. So let me jump back to mine. Let's get it on the screen before we run out of time. So can you guys guess how we're going to get the announcement box showing up on the screen? It's pretty simple. We just got to go to the renderer and change it again. So this is our second time changing it now. Announcement box. And there we go. So it all works. And it looks the same, but it is fairly different now because now we are set up to use some of those powerful features of our class-based component. And so my next step would be to take the data that is in the in the announcement list right now, that little hard-coded data, I'd take it out of there and I'd move it into our announcement box now and then give it as a prop to the class list, announcement list, sorry. I feel like I butchered that statement. Let me show you what I mean. Do we have like 2 minutes? I don't want to make the next prof upset, but let's see if we can do this real quick. I'm going to give this a quick save. I'm going to take that data that's in the list right now. I'm going to take it out of here, yep, grab our whole array. So that's going to break it just for a moment, but not for long. Ah. Okay, I'm going to component now. And then is that now to give that data to list component. You know what I mean? So I could do it in through the props announcement list. So then up in the and say something like props.data. Yeah, I broke it. I'm trying to go too fast. Data is not fun. Let me change my const. And then change this to this data. Yeah, there we go. So the question you'd probably ask yourself from this is like, what does it matter? Why did I move it here, right? Well, I move it here because this guy is capable of talking to a database. My other guy wasn't. So you can imagine, like, I'm probably going to replace this with a call to a database to get it. Then we could hook up Firebase. We could have a really nice real-time announcement list coming from Firebase that you could update, add more announcements to, remove them, change the dates on them, and all that stuff. And when you do, it will automatically render. That's the other beautiful thing with React, is that it just keeps refreshing it. When stuff changes, it knows and it updates it. Very nice, very nice. That was good. I'm spent. Today was a good one. Like, that's a really important lesson today, I would say. And those steps, that way of planning your components is how you always do it with React. We did it with a list item here, but you do it the same with anything you want to do. If it needs some data, some kind of dynamic data, you're going to need one of these powerful class-based components. But that guy doesn't do any of the HTML. He doesn't do any of the rendering. Instead, you compose your dumb components in there, and they handle that job. And then that makes those dumb components very reusable across your entire application. So now we've got our general purpose list here that we where we want to, because we just get here, it's concert announcements, maybe on another one, it's local events, it's, you know, whatever. Shit. Well, we're out of time. Sorry, dude. Yeah, we're out of time. But, you know, just make sure you save it. And then if you can't get it working, well, someone will be helping you out shortly on it. So you can also, like, you don't have to wait for the feedback. You can go to that area and leave a question or whatever in there, and then that'll go to whoever's going to help you out. So. Looking good, people. I think that's a wrap. So just while I have this open to this nice looking thing, are we fairly clear that I do want to see you guys take a little initiative with this stuff? Mine that I just did is a piece of garbage. Like, I would never show that to a client, never ever. But it's, you know, it's useful. It's a useful thing. Let's see how you use it.
Here, props here, and what else? Where else?
The other thing was in our class component down here. Oh, this one I changed to this .data.
Oh, this.
Like that. And then, yeah, and you've already got it here. And now I think you got it. Yeah.
So you say the reason I put it here is you can access to Firebase things like that?
That's right. So in another class, what we would do, coded stuff, and instead substitute a URL call to a database to get the data. So you could get it from Firebase. Yeah. That's going to be fun when we do that.
Isn't that the order here, right? You can put a render here and constructor here. I mean, if you
That's
mix
true. That's true.
So
Now,
these
most
two-
developers will put the constructor up top. Don't have to. That's just something they usually do. So.
So this is like a common way to do like constructor, render, and bit mount.
These ones down here, I see them in every which order, but usually the constructor does come first. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I gotta shut it down, guys. I actually got cautioned about going overtime, so I gotta be a little careful. sorry. Let me just get my stuff shut down.